And we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. And today we're talking about Dragon Age: The Veilguard. It's been a long time coming for this one, both the making of this game and now this video. So sorry for the delay. We didn't get a review copy. We didn't get it early. We don't always get them. It happens. So I bought this and I played a ton from the second the game went live. So here are just some first impressions. You've probably seen headlines or comments or reviews about this one already. It is a big topic of conversation. I'm tuning that out and just trying to see if it was worth the wait. You know, is Bioware back? And is the game fun? My answer really isn't as sensationalist. Ultimately, so far, after 10 plus hours in, I'm happy to say it's not an Andromeda or Anthem level disaster or anything like that. Veilguard is a solid game. But for me, it's just missing a little bit of zest. You know, it's got cool environments, big cinematic storytelling and moments, some good visuals, but it still feels like ever so slightly generic or safe to me. It's very simple from an RPG standpoint. It's way more action RPG. And I think that's going to leave some RPG fans feeling a little unsatisfied. It's worth noting my perspective, though, where I'm coming from. So most of my experience is Dragon Age Origins. I loved that game. I know we're like years and years from that, and I have played some Inquisition, and this feels like way more of that flavor and vibe. Either way, I'm just here to lay out the elements of the game and the mechanics and stuff, what I think works and what I think doesn't, and then it's up to you to see if it's your thing. So without any spoilers, of course, the basic story setup is this. There's basically this big impending disaster, a rift is opened, and these evil elven gods are awakened and are making Thedas a worse place with blight and corruption. It quickly gets way more complicated than that, and I'm kind of butchering it to paraphrase, but basically it's up to you and your friends and some uneasy alliances to adventure around and save the world. You create a new character nicknamed Rook, and in my experience, the character creator was pretty robust, and I was actually basically able to make Link from Zelda if he was a real person. And I was pretty happy with how he came out. He looks pretty cool. The male voice actor for Rook also does a really good job. Weirdly enough, though, you're like the newcomer who is just slotted in with some recurring characters from Inquisition. And from what I've seen so far, this game is a fairly light-hearted romp. Yes, the fate of the world is at stake, and the Dark Spawn are pretty gross and nasty at times, but characters are just charismatic and quippy, and the pace isn't always super urgent. There are 3 main classes you choose at the start, along with some character origin stuff that applies to some dialogue here and there, but the classes are Warrior, Mage, and Rogue. I went Rogue. Combat is real-time and hack and slashy. You have heavy attacks, light attacks, a dodge, and if you press it again, do like a bigger roll, ranged attacks, and a parry button. From there, you have specialized class-based abilities that are based on cooldowns, mapped to like the trigger hold with a face button press, as well as an ultimate ability, and eventually some rune abilities or things you activate. All special attacks are very distinctly different and interesting. Some are ranged, some are AoE, some grant you health or stack debuffs or like poisons on enemies, and the enemies have shields that also need to be downed by range sometimes, as well as a stagger meter you can mess with that then opens up enemies to these cool finishing move attacks. So your party members are pretty basic. You don't have to worry about them too much. You can manage who they attack, but you know, on auto they seem just fine for the most part. Their abilities are mapped as well, but like I found it pretty easy to just bring up the radial slow-mo menu to trigger them. It works pretty good. And then when you're using all that stuff, the allies seem genuinely helpful, if a little overly chatty in battle. The biggest thing you can get out of them is the primer and detonator system. So certain attacks are labeled as types of primers. They essentially set up an enemy to then be attacked by another ally's special attack that is the corresponding correct detonator. So time these right and make the right choices and matches in battle to cause way more stagger and damage and stuff. It makes for a decent amount of things to manage. I found combat pretty exciting, if inevitably a bit repetitive feeling after a while, once I got my preferred abilities and tactics really locked in. But still, it's very active, hits are are responsive, the feedback is good, the on-screen effects are pretty chaotic and over the top, and a lot of the combat animations and movement animations are really, really good. My character does like a round-off flip to dodge a fireball and then does a big twin sword upward slash while one of my allies on the corner of the screen is freezing an enemy. In action, it can be pretty cool, like in motion and stuff, if not always very deep. As you progress, you level up and earn points that you dump into a skill tree. The skill tree is a pretty lengthy one with like a lot of different nodes. Even if some of the nodes are just like the occasional, unlock 10% resistance or 3% extra attack power, those types of things. But in between those are more skills and abilities. And there are also a handful of specializations for each class too. So say if you're a rogue who likes to be close up, like me, you can lean into that with duelist abilities, or the duelist specialization. Or if you're more ranged, you can embrace that angle too. So it's all a lot of stuff we've technically seen before, and it does it all in a pretty normal, unpredictable, unsurprising way. The most intensely engaging systems, I don't know, but pretty fun at least. What I did enjoy a lot was some of the bigger enemy encounters, and the game feels much, much stronger when it's challenging, so consider your difficulty choice wisely. And when you're going through a fairly linear area, it can be simplistic and often formulaic. A left turn and there's a hidden chest, or collect this thing to trigger a door to open and then walk back over here. Very standard stuff, but what I did enjoy were the bigger locales, like the cities and those types of regions just look really unique right from the start. Like some of those locations have a real like wow factor to them. I was like, damn, that's a fantasy RPG city right there. I like discovering this stuff, and I found myself naturally exploring some of them just for the sake of it. Sometimes you'll find some side stuff or something to read or loot. Unfortunately, the loot has kind of disappointed me. There are good quality of life things, like as soon as you pick up loot, you automatically get a comparison screen and an easy equip, but I just haven't seen a lot of compelling loot yet. I've been getting by just fine without really feeling deeply compelled to vie for some great loot, and tended to just craft upgrades of my current stuff. At the very least, some of the armor looks very cool, and there's also transmog, which I appreciate very much. You're managing some of this stuff in the lighthouse, a kind of mystical home base where you can check your gear, talk to allies, and get into deeper conversations. You also have like your own kind of bedroom that you can buy trinkets and merchants and stuff, and then customize your room a little bit. Then you can also fast travel into the real world for quests here, and also wander around and explore some little secrets. It's just a good hangout location. And yes, you can build relationships with characters, so it is a Bioware game in my eyes there. It also looks pretty good. It's totally subjective, but I like the more stylized, slightly cartoonish art style here. Mostly because I like the environments, like I mentioned, and my character looked pretty badass. The game has a lot of bold colors while also having a bit of a dreamlike fantasy hue or haze to it all, and I think it helps it stand out a little bit. Like I said, it's not for everyone, but hey, at least it performs well. The game feels very polished to me, which is very refreshing, honestly. I haven't really encountered any bugs or glitches. Maybe one tiny visual one, but that's really it. It's pretty impressive. There's performance and fidelity modes on PS5 here, which is where I played, and performance mode does lower the resolution a bit, where it does look a little fuzzy at times, but at the very least, the frame rate was very solid. Where the game has faltered for me is the RPG agency. The action RPG stuff, fine. It is what it is. If it's not the most complex, whatever, it's still fun, but it's the RPG decisions and conversations that I didn't feel really had enough tangible, meaningful differences and impacts. First of all, Rook is a player-created character, but still kind of locked into being a good guy. That's fine, but the game does give you choices to how to respond. Normal or kind of jokey or a little bit gruff. Choices are great, I'm happy to have them, but in my experience, most of the time, it feels meaningless. Like, choose the gruff dialogue, or the tougher dialogue, to just ask a character to get to the point or whatever. And characters just kind of shrug off the different ways you've responded. It doesn't really seem like a lot of those like dialogue choices moment to moment are there for anything really but some set dressing. Again, first impressions, it could very well be proven wrong in the long run or later in the game, but yeah, the conversation stuff for me left quite a bit to be desired. Along along with that, I've encountered very few moments where the game presents me with one of those big binary choices, and the ones I got weren't very exciting. So it's this stuff that I think might disappoint some people. I don't feel like I'm like shaping my world or my story in a good RPG fashion. Something I've kind of come to expect from this studio one way or another. The returning characters here are awesome and iconic, but the new characters are hit and miss. Some are interesting, some aren't. I think some of it comes down to cheesy dialogue. It's very current day, and that's not always a bad thing. I don't need every fantasy game to have characters that talk all old-timey, but here I found a lot of jokes that didn't quite land and some emotional beats that just felt a little too hammy. Again, I wasn't like the biggest Dragon Age Inquisition player, so maybe that's my bias. So with all that being said, Dragon Age feels competently made, not a glitchy mess, and reasonably fun. It also feels a bit safe, like it plays it a bit safe, and a little bit cheesy. Those are my biggest marks against it. So that's a matter of taste and personal preference. I really can't quite pin down how Dragon Age fans are gonna feel about this one, because as much as I love Bioware, Dragon Age was never really my top franchise. I was more of a KOTOR Jade Empire guy. So far, I'm putting this in the okay category, you know? It takes some steps away from that hardcore RPG stuff that is a little disappointing, but otherwise, it is a fairly solid game. It just feels a bit safe and is not for everyone. And no, nobody paid me to say this. At the very least, I am just glad BioWare made a game that isn't a total disaster. But hey, that's a before you buy. You know how this goes by now. I'll give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, and now I want to hear yours down in the comments. Again, this is only our first impressions here, so chances are if you are playing it, you have first impressions as well, so let us know in the comments. If you're not into the game, chances are you're probably going to let us know why, and we'd love to hear from you either way. However you feel about Dragon Age the Veilguard, let us know in the comments. If you like this video, you know we put out videos every single day, so clicking the like button helps us out. Thank you. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
She's gonna help us find Solus. Nev meet Rook. Harding and I found him a while back. Thought we could use an expert on trouble.
Rook, like the chess piece?
One of the strongest pieces on the board.